Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today's project is going to be a big one. We are going to be making a plush that's over 7 feet long. We are going to be making a giant centipede. I thought it'd be really fun. I really like bugs and I haven't done anything bug related yet for the channel, so I thought I'd try it out. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, the first thing we're going to start on is going to be the head of the centipede, and then we're going to slowly work our way down his body until he's finished. So for our pattern for the head, I've got 2 pieces for it. Over here to the left is going to be the top and bottom piece, and then over here to the right, this little triangle, this is going to be the sides of the face. That way our head isn't completely flat. Now you'll notice that I have 2 patterns drawn out. One normal pattern and then one is about a ½ inch wider all the way around. I'm doing this because I'm going to use the larger one to cut out the piece, and then I'm going to put the other pattern on that piece and trace that, and we're going to follow those lines to sew it. So for the fabric pieces you'll need a top and a bottom. I'm going to use red, and then for the sides I'm going to use orange. You'll need 2 of those as well. Now before we start sewing the face, I need to give our centipede a pair of eyes. So the simple way to do this is to take that pattern we have for the face, draw out how you want the eyes to go, and then cut those out. Use that pattern to draw how you want the eyes on the fabric. Now I'm going to take a black piece of fabric and lay that down, and then I'm going to lay the pattern onto that, pin it in place, and then we're going to sew along the shape for the eye. After that, you're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut the extra fabric off of your face, and you should have a nice pair of black eyes for your centipede. Now one more thing that we need for the centipede's face is a pair of antennae. So I have some strips of fabric right here, and we're going to use those to make the antennae. The first thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more detail to them. I'm going to take my sewing machine and I'm going to sew lines going all the way down the antennae. I'm doing this to add a bit of a fun texture to it, and it'll make it look a lot more like a pair of antennae. Now halfway through sewing the lines for the antennae, I ended up running out of thread in my sewing machine, and instead of just re-spooling it with the same color, I decided to add a different color just to see how it would look. So once all of our lines are sewn into the strips of fabric, I'm going to cut them apart, and then I'm going to fold them over and sew them together. Now you're probably wondering how you're supposed to flip these right side out because they're so thin. Well, here's a really easy way to do that. So I'm going to take a needle and thread, I'm going to sew my thread onto the end of one of the antennae, and then I'm going to tie that string off onto the end of a pin. Now when making your antennae, make sure they're wide enough, that way something like a pen or even just one of your smaller fingers can actually fit into it. That way you can flip them right side out. So you're going to take that pen and you're going to push it through, and you're going to run it all the way through to the other end. Once you have it all the way through, you're going to pull that string, and it's going to take that fabric on one end and it's going to suck it into the antenna and pull it out the other way. And that's pretty much the easiest way to flip something right side out that's really thin. So after we have our antennae right side out, I'm going to take one end of each one and I'm going to tuck it in a little bit, and we're going to sew that end closed. So to put the face together, I'm going to take the top of the face first, and I'm going to take one of those triangles. I'm going to put the widest part of the triangle at the base of the head, and I'm going to line up the face with that triangle and pin it together. Now I'm just going to run my sewing machine until I get to the eye, and then I'm going to repin my face, and then just keep going until I'm done with the triangle. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side of the face, and once we have the two sides connected to one piece, I'm going to take the bottom of the face and we're going to pin those together and sew those as well. So this is what our head looks like right now. We still have an opening in the very front of the face, and we're going to use that to sew on the antennae. So these little noodles right now are not going to work for antennae because they're just not holding their shape. So the easiest way to do that is I'm going to measure them, and then I'm going to cut wires that can go inside of them. I'm going to make sure to bend all the ends of the wires, that way they're not sharp and they won't break through the fabric. And then I'm just going to insert them into the fabric, and then we can sew them onto the face. Now that we have the head finished, we can move on to sewing the body segments. So here on my left, I have the pattern that's going to be used to make the top and bottom of our body segments. Make sure when you draw yours out that you make it the same width as the pattern that you did for the face. Now the pattern for the leg can be a little bit more confusing, but it's actually not too bad. Pretty much this little square that the leg is connected to is half the length of the body segment itself. So just measure half of that, and that's where you're going to make a little square, and then you're going to draw your leg connected to that square. So when you sew this, you're going to sew two of the legs together, and these squares are going to flap out and sew onto the sides. Now the fabric you'll need for one body segment is going to be one top and one bottom, and then you're going to need two left sides of the legs and two right sides of the legs. But you're not just going to make one body segment, you're going to have to make a bunch of them to make your centipede nice and long. Now you're welcome to make as many as you want. I'm going to make 10 body segments, not including the head and tail, so technically it's 12 body segments. Now for my centipede, I also want to make him with stripes, so I'm going to have the body segments change back and forth between two colors. So I decided that I want half of my body segments to be red and half of them to be black. Now to make all 10 body segments for my centipede, I'm going to need 10 black, 10 red, and then for the legs I'm going to need 20 left and 20 right. So this is all the stuff I have to cut out for the body. So I'm going to start sewing the legs for the body. So I'm going to take one side of the leg, and then I'm going to lay the other side of the leg on top of that, and we're going to pin these together, and then I'm going to sew along this line around the leg. Okay, so I have the sewing done for my legs for one segment, along with all of these legs that are going to be for the next segments. Okay, so now we're going to sew our legs onto the body segment pieces. This is where you could easily mess up and sew one leg maybe a different direction if you're not paying attention, so just make sure you have them facing the correct way when you're pinning and sewing them together. So to sew on our legs, we're going to take the little squares that are connected to our legs, and we're going to lay that out, and we're going to pin that to where we connect one side to the body piece. We're going to sew along that, and then once we're done, we're going to do the same thing to the other one. After we have two of the legs connected to one of the body segments, we can get the other body segment and we can start sewing that on as well. Okay, so I finished sewing all of the body segments. I have 5 black and 5 red, and now we can start sewing them together. Okay, to start sewing our centipede, we're going to start with the head, and since I made the head red, we're going to take a black body segment, flip it inside out, and we're going to pin these two together. Once we have them pinned together, we're going to sew all the way around, connecting the two pieces together. So it's going to look something like this. We have the head connected to the first body segment. Now before we add another body segment to our centipede, we're going to stuff and wire the legs for this one. We're going to keep doing this with each segment as we go. So to get the measurement for the wire that we need, since we're going to make the 2 legs on one wire, we're going to measure from one tip of a leg to the other tip of the leg. We're going to cut our wire, make sure to bend the 2 ends of the wire so they're not sharp, and then we're going to move on to stuffing these legs and then running the wire through the legs. After these two legs are finished, we can move on to adding another body segment. This time we're going to grab a red one and we're going to do the same thing that we did with the last one. Just be careful with the wire that you have in the legs because it is going to kind of stick out, so just kind of try and keep it out of the way so it doesn't get stuck on your sewing machine. Okay, so now you can see that we have two body segments and the head connected. You can see how the striping effect is looking, and it's looking really nice. So we're going to keep sewing on some body segments. Now once I was about halfway done with the sewing, I realized that now is a good time to probably stuff what I have now, because when the body gets too long, it's going to be just kind of a pain to reach all the way down the centipede to stuff it. So I'm going to stuff this, and then I'm going to add some more body segments. Now the further along I get, the more the body is just kind of a pain because you've got this large stuffed item connected to you in the sewing machine and you have to rotate it with you as you're connecting another segment to it. So it's something to be careful of and make sure you have a nice open workspace. Okay, so I finally finished all the body segments. I'm going to stuff the rest of the body and then we're going to work on the tail piece. So this is the pattern to make the tail of the centipede. Right here to the left is the main body segment. Just like the head and the other body segments, make sure that this is the same width as those. And then the triangle thing here is the exact same thing that we used on the head piece. And then I've got this over here to be some extra legs that we're going to sew on. These are not going to be wired or anything, they're just going to be sewn on. So for this we'll need 2 of the body segments, 2 of the sides, and then we're going to have 4 legs on the end of the tail, so you'll need 4 of the left and 4 of the right leg. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the fabric for the legs and I'm going to pin them all together and get those sewn up. After that I'm going to flip them right side out and then I'm going to stuff them. So I'm going to take the triangles that are going to be the sides and I'm going to actually have the legs going through them, at least 2 of them. So I'm going to draw where I want the leg to be and I'm going to cut a little hole there. Then I'm going to run the leg through and we're going to sew that in place. Now I'm going to take that triangle that we had the leg connected to and we're going to start pinning it to the tail pattern. We're going to do that to both sides of this pattern and then we're going to connect the other one on top. Okay, so this is what we have right now for the tail piece. Just like the head, it has a hole at the very top and we're going to need that to help sew it onto the rest of the body. So we're going to take the fabric that we have on the body of the centipede and we're going to run it through this small hole on the end of the tail, and then we're going to take that fabric and we're going to pin it to the other fabric side. You're going to only sew 3 of these sides. You're going to need to leave a nice opening. That way we can finish stuffing it and flipping it right side out. Okay, so now that we have the tail sewn onto the centipede, we just need to sew the last 2 legs on the end of it. So I'm just going to tuck those legs and pin them into place and we're going to sew along that. Then we can continue to flip the rest of the tail right side out and stuff and close it. Okay guys, and that's how I made a giant centipede plush. I'm gonna have him in my Etsy shop, so make sure to check the links down below for that. I had so much fun with him. He works wonderful as a body pillow. I would recommend kind of tucking his legs in because he's kind of pokey, but just have him hugging himself and it's no problem. You can hug him while he hugs himself. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed today's project. If so, leave me a like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!